I'm Scarlett, 34, and I just discovered my 8-year-old niece isn't mute. She pulled my hand and whispered the most terrifying words I've ever heard. Auntie, Mommy said you're going to die soon and Grandma's inheritance will be ours. The smile never left my face, but inside, my world just shattered into 1,000 pieces. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely betrayed by family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up to how I ended up babysitting my supposedly mute niece while my sister went to handle a plumbing emergency at the inherited country house. It was a Tuesday morning when Madison called, sounding frazzled about burst pipes and expensive repairs. Could I watch Emma for just 3 days? Of course, I said, because that's what family does, or what I thought family did. I'd been running our family's luxury jewelry business since Mom passed 2 years ago, building it from a successful local shop into an international brand. The inheritance had been clear. I got the business I'd worked in since I was 15. Madison got the mansion and several valuable pieces, and little Emma inherited the country house. Mom knew who had actually been present, who understood the work. Madison had seemed smart about her inheritance, selling off expensive cars and designer bags, downsizing her lifestyle. I'd actually felt proud watching my little sister finally grow up and handle money responsibly. Shows how much I knew about anything. Emma was always such a sweet kid, communicating through gestures and written notes. The doctors said her muteness was likely psychological, maybe related to her father leaving when she was 3. Madison had tried speech therapy, specialists, everything. We'd all accepted it as part of who Emma was. But when that car turned the corner and Emma's small voice cut through the afternoon silence, every assumption I'd ever made about my family exploded. Titia, mamãe disse que você vai morrer logo e que a herança que a vovó deixou vai ser nossa. The Portuguese is lipped out, our grandmother's language, making it even more chilling. Emma immediately clapped her hands over her mouth, eyes wide with terror. Not the terror of a child who'd accidentally spoken for the first time, the terror of a child who'd revealed a secret she was never supposed to tell. I knelt down to her level, keeping my voice gentle despite my racing heart. Emma, sweetheart, what did you just say? She shook her head frantically, backing away from me. The silence that had defined her for 5 years suddenly seemed less like disability and more like self-preservation. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, Emma's words echoing in my mind. My sister, who I'd been supporting emotionally and financially since Mom's death, was apparently planning my death, and she'd been cruel enough to involve her daughter in whatever twisted plan she'd concocted. The really sick part? I'd been so proud of Madison for maturing financially. Turns out she wasn't being responsible. She was liquidating assets because she expected a much bigger payday very soon. As I listened to Emma's peaceful breathing from the guest bed, I realized everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. But I had one advantage Madison didn't know about. I'd just learned her biggest secret. And unlike my 8-year-old niece, I wasn't going to stay silent about it. Growing up, I was the daughter who showed up. While Madison lived like a princess on automatic allowances, I spent after-school hours and summers learning everything about our family's jewelry business. Not because Mom forced me, because I genuinely loved the craftsmanship, the stories behind each piece, the art of matching clients with their perfect treasure. Madison, 3 years younger and infinitely more charming, treated our family store like her personal ATM. She'd breeze in occasionally, grab cash for whatever social event required her presence, and disappear again. Mom never seemed to mind. Madison needs to find herself, she'd say whenever I questioned the obvious favoritism. Apparently, I'd already found myself, working. When I turned 18, I enrolled in gemology courses and business classes while Madison backpacked through Europe on our parents' dime. When I was 25 and managing daily operations, Madison was exploring yoga retreats in Costa Rica to align her chakras. When I was 30 and implementing our international expansion, Madison was trying to become an influencer. The funny thing about family businesses, they reveal who actually cares about the family. Mom's will reflected that reality perfectly. I inherited the jewelry company valued at $3.2 million plus all the business assets and client relationships I'd spent years building. Madison got the family mansion worth $800,000, Mom's personal collection of vintage jewelry valued at $400,000, and saw Emma inherit the country house worth $350,000. No liquid cash, no automatic income streams, no trust funds. For someone who'd never earned a dollar in her life, Madison suddenly faced property taxes, maintenance costs, and the reality that beautiful houses don't pay for themselves. I'd expected her to rent out rooms or sell the smaller pieces of jewelry to manage expenses. Instead, she seemed to handle everything with surprising maturity. Staff dismissed, luxury cars sold, designer collections liquidated. I'd actually complimented her on making tough choices so gracefully. She'd smiled and thanked me for understanding how difficult the transition was. What an actress. After Mom's funeral, Madison had hugged me tearfully and said, "I'm so grateful you're taking care of the business Mom loved so much. I could never do what you do." At the time, it felt like acknowledgement, maybe even respect. Now I realized it was probably sizing up exactly what she'd eventually inherit when I was no longer around to inherit it myself. The morning after Emma's revelation, I watched my niece push eggs around her plate, her small shoulders tense with secrets she was too young to carry. She kept glancing at me nervously, then looking away quickly when our eyes met. "Emma," I said gently, "you know I love you, right? No matter what." She nodded, but still wouldn't speak. "And you know that if someone asks you to keep a secret that makes you feel scared or sad, it's okay to tell a grown-up you trust?" This time she looked directly at me, conflict playing across her 8-year-old features. I could practically see her wrestling between loyalty to her mother and the relief of finally having someone who might listen. After breakfast, I called my assistant to clear my schedule. Whatever Madison was planning, I needed to understand the scope before I decided how to protect both Emma and myself. But first, I had to figure out exactly what my sister thought she knew about inheritance law, and whether she'd been planning my death since the day Mom's will was read. The scariest part wasn't that Madison wanted me dead. The scariest part was how long she'd apparently been planning it, and how naturally she'd involved her daughter in the conspiracy. Looking at Emma's frightened face across the breakfast table, I realized this wasn't just about money or inheritance anymore. This was about saving a child from a mother who'd already damaged her enough to steal 5 years of her voice. Time to find out exactly what Madison thought she was inheriting when I was gone. I spent the morning acting normal, letting Emma watch cartoons while I supposedly worked from home, but my mind was racing, trying to piece together Madison's plan. If she needed access to something at the house to execute whatever she was plotting, this plumbing emergency might be the perfect cover. Around noon, I suggested we go get some of Emma's clothes and school supplies from Madison's house. Emma nodded eagerly, maybe too eagerly, like she wanted to get away from the weight of her secret. Madison's mansion, inherited from Mom, sat on 3 acres of perfectly manicured grounds that probably cost more to maintain than most people's annual salaries. The kind of place that screams wealth but whispers bankruptcy if you can't afford the upkeep. Using the spare key Madison had given me years ago, we entered through the side door. Emma immediately ran upstairs to pack some clothes, leaving me standing in the vast foyer with its crystal chandelier and marble floors. Everything looked normal, expensive, and completely beyond Madison's means to maintain. But something felt off. I wandered toward Madison's home office, a room I'd never paid much attention to before. The door stood slightly ajar, revealing a desk covered with papers and an open laptop. My sister had always been careless with security, probably never imagining anyone would have reason to investigate her private affairs. "Auntie?" Emma's voice startled me. She stood at the top of the staircase, a small suitcase in her hands. "Can I show you something?" She descended the stairs carefully, then approached me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mommy's computer," she whispered, pointing toward the office. "Sometimes she lets me use it for games and printing school projects. I know the password." My heart stopped. "Emma, we shouldn't—" "Please," she interrupted, her voice barely audible. "I want to show you something scary." The way she said scary made my blood run cold. This 8-year-old child was trying to protect me from something she'd accidentally discovered, something that had probably been traumatizing her for who knows how long. Emma led me to the desk and pointed at the sleeping laptop. "She thinks I don't pay attention, but I do. I saw her typing to someone about you." With trembling fingers, Emma clicked the trackpad and the screen came to life, asking for a password. She typed carefully, "Emma 2016, apparently the year my niece was born, the same password Madison had been using for years." The laptop opened directly to a messenger app, and what I saw there made my knees buckle. Conversation after conversation with someone listed as Rico M, messages spanning several weeks. And the content was exactly what Emma's slip had suggested, but somehow much worse than my worst fears. "Need this handled before the quarterly business review," Madison had written 3 days ago. "She'll be driving the mountain route to the Vancouver client meeting next week. Brake lines should fail on those curves. Make it look accidental." My sister had been planning to murder me with the precision of a business transaction. Rico's responses were equally chilling. "Understood. Same rate as discussed. Payment when job confirmed complete." I screenshotted everything, my hands shaking so badly I could barely operate the phone. There were dozens of messages, including discussions about timing, location, payment methods, and backup plans. Madison had been treating my assassination like a project management exercise. But the most devastating discovery was a folder on the desktop labeled After S. Inside were documents she'd apparently prepared for after my death. A fake will naming her as my business successor, forged financial records showing business debt that didn't exist, and letters to clients explaining why the company would need new leadership. She'd thought of everything. Emma stood beside me, watching my face as I processed the magnitude of Madison's betrayal. "She doesn't know I can read the big words," she whispered, "but I know what kill means." This child had been living with the knowledge that her mother was planning to murder her aunt. No wonder she'd stopped speaking. How do you process something like that at 8 years old? I closed the laptop and knelt down to Emma's level. "Sweetheart, you did the right thing showing me this. You've been very brave. Are you going to tell the police?" she asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Was I? Could I prove any of this? Would anyone believe that my grieving sister was capable of premeditated murder? More importantly, how could I protect Emma from the consequences of whatever came next? "I need to think about the best way to keep us both safe," I told her honestly. "But Emma, you won't have to keep this secret anymore. I promise." For the first time in days, something like relief crossed her face. But as we left Madison's house, I realized my sister wasn't just planning to kill me for money. She'd been systematically positioning herself to take over everything I'd built, while traumatizing her own daughter in the process. Time to figure out if I was smart enough to outwit someone who'd been planning my murder for months. That evening, after Emma was asleep, I sat in my kitchen staring at screenshots that proved my sister wanted me dead. The evidence was damning, but I needed professional advice before making any moves that might endanger Emma or myself. I called James Patterson, the estate attorney who'd handled Mom's will. Even at 9 p.m., he answered on the second ring. "Scarlett? What's wrong?" "James, I need to ask you some hypothetical legal questions about inheritance law." "At this hour, it's not hypothetical. What's happening?" I took a deep breath. "If something happened to me, what would happen to the business?" "Your will designates your sister as beneficiary, as you insisted despite my recommendations. She'd inherit everything." My stomach dropped. I'd written that will 3 years ago, back when I thought Madison was just immature, not homicidal. And if Madison inherited, what about Emma? As Madison's daughter, Emma would eventually inherit from her mother. "Why are you asking?" "James, I need you to come over tomorrow morning. I have evidence that Madison is planning to kill me." Silence. Then, "Scarlett, that's an extremely serious accusation. I have screenshots of her planning my murder with someone she's hired. She's been discussing brake line sabotage and timing it around my business travel." "Jesus Christ. Have you contacted police?" "I wanted to talk to you first. There's a child involved. Emma's been traumatized by accidentally overhearing these plans. That's actually how I found out. I'll be there at 8 a.m. Don't go anywhere alone, and don't let Madison know you're aware of anything." After hanging up, I spent hours researching everything I could about Rico M. Madison's chat logs showed payments to someone with the email ricom.services@protonmail.com. A quick search revealed Rico Martinez, 34, with a history of assault charges and suspected involvement in several accidental deaths over the past decade. My sister had hired a professional. The next morning, James arrived carrying 2 large coffee cups and wearing the grim expression of someone who'd clearly lost sleep over our conversation. "Show me everything," he said. I walked him through the screenshots, the computer access, Emma's initial revelation, and the forged documents Madison had prepared for after my death. "This is sophisticated," he said finally. "She's been planning this for months, maybe longer. The forged will, the fake debt records, the communication with a known criminal. This isn't impulse. This is premeditation. What do I do?" "We call the police immediately. But Scarlett, you need to understand. Once we make this report, everything changes. Emma will likely be placed in protective custody. Madison will be arrested. Your family as you know it ends today." I thought about Emma's terrified face, her 5 years of silence, the weight of secrets no child should carry. "My family ended the day Madison decided to hire someone to kill me," I said. "Emma deserves better than a mother who involves her in murder conspiracies." James nodded and pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Detective Sarah Mitchell. She specializes in family crimes and has experience with cases involving children as witnesses." As he made the call, I realized there was something else I needed to do. Madison expected me to be dead within days. Instead of just playing defense, maybe it was time to turn her own plan against her. When James finished with the detective, I outlined my idea. "Absolutely not," he said immediately. "You are not using yourself as bait. James, think about it. We have evidence of planning, but not attempted murder. If Madison's going to prison, I want charges that stick. I want this to be so airtight that she never gets the chance to hurt Emma again. And if something goes wrong with your plan, then you'll have very clear evidence of murder, not just conspiracy." He stared at me for a long moment. You're talking about deliberately walking into an assassination attempt. I'm talking about making sure my sister never has the opportunity to traumatize another child or plot another murder. When Detective Mitchell arrived an hour later, she reviewed the evidence with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen too many family betrayals. Her questions were sharp, direct, and completely focused on Emma's safety. "The child has been living with this knowledge for how long?" she asked. "Possibly weeks or months," I replied. "She's been essentially mute for 5 years, since her father left. Now I'm wondering if that's related to Madison's behavior patterns. We'll need to interview Emma with a child psychologist present. But Ms. Anderson, I have to advise against any plan that puts you at risk. We can arrest your sister based on conspiracy charges alone." "Detective, my sister hired a professional killer and has backup plans. If Rico Martinez doesn't complete this job, she'll find someone else. I'd rather end this permanently." After 2 more hours of discussion, we developed a plan that satisfied both my need for justice and the detective's requirement for safety. Madison was about to discover that planning a murder and executing it successfully were 2 very different things, especially when your intended victim knew exactly what you were planning. The next morning, I called Madison to check on her plumbing situation, forcing my voice to sound concerned and slightly stressed. "Oh, it's been a nightmare," she sighed dramatically. "The whole main line burst. There's water damage throughout the east wing, and the contractor says it'll take at least another week." "That's terrible. Emma's doing fine, but I do need to talk to you about something work-related." "What's wrong?" "The Vancouver client wants to move up our meeting to discuss the custom pieces for their new store locations. I need to drive up there tomorrow morning instead of waiting until next week." I could practically hear Madison's pulse quicken through the phone. "Tomorrow? That's sudden. I know, but they're offering to triple the order if we can accommodate the timeline change. It's too much money to pass up. Will you be driving?" "Perfect." She was taking the bait exactly as Detective Mitchell and I had anticipated. "Yes, I'll take the mountain route like always. It's faster than flying with all the security delays, and I can transport the sample pieces safely in my car." "Scarlett, maybe you should wait. The weather forecast shows possible snow, and those mountain roads can be dangerous." The concern in her voice was so convincing that for a moment, I almost forgot she was trying to get me killed. "I'll be careful," I assured her. "Actually, would you mind if I borrowed Rico for the drive? I know he's done long-distance trips for you before, and I'd feel safer having an experienced driver." The silence that followed was loaded. Madison was probably calculating whether offering her hired killer direct access to me was too obvious, or whether she could make it look like she was just being helpful. "Rico? I'm not sure he's available. Could you check? I'd really appreciate the peace of mind. Let me call him and see." 20 minutes later, she called back. "Good news. Rico said he'd be happy to drive for you. He knows those mountain routes really well." "I bet he does." "That's wonderful. Can he pick me up at 6 a.m.? We'll need to leave early to make the afternoon appointment." "He'll be there." "Scarlett, please be careful. I love you." The sincerity in her voice was chilling. My sister could tell me she loved me while actively arranging my murder. That kind of compartmentalization suggested a level of psychological dysfunction I'd never recognized before. After hanging up, I called Detective Mitchell to confirm that everything was in place. "The surveillance team will be positioned along your route," she assured me. "Rico's vehicle will have tracking devices, and you'll be wearing both a wire and a GPS tracker. The moment he makes any move to sabotage your car or harm you, we'll intervene." "What about Emma?" "Child Protective Services will take her into protective custody tomorrow morning, before the arrest. She'll be safe regardless of what happens." That evening, I sat Emma down for a conversation I'd never imagined having to have. "Tomorrow, some very nice people are going to take care of you while I handle some grown-up problems with your mommy." Her eyes grew wide. "Is mommy in trouble because of the scary computer messages?" "Yes, sweetheart. But the trouble is because of choices your mommy made, not because of anything you did by showing me those messages. You helped keep me safe. Will I see you again?" "Absolutely. This is just temporary while the police make sure everyone is safe." "Will I see mommy again?" That question broke my heart. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her mother is going to prison for attempted murder? "I don't know yet, Emma, but I promise you'll always have someone who loves you and will take care of you." She nodded solemnly, then hugged me tighter than she ever had before. That night, I barely slept. In 12 hours, I'd be getting into a car with a man hired to kill me, trusting that police surveillance and safety protocols would prevent my sister's plan from succeeding. But more than my own safety, I was worried about Emma. She'd spent 5 years unable to speak, traumatized by whatever she'd witnessed or overheard in Madison's house. Tomorrow would either free her from that trauma or add another layer to it. At 5:30 a.m., I watched from my kitchen window as unmarked police cars positioned themselves around my neighborhood. Detective Mitchell's voice crackled through the nearly invisible earpiece they'd fitted me with. "We're in position. Scarlett, remember, act natural, but don't take any unnecessary risks. The moment you feel unsafe, say the code phrase. At exactly 6 a.m., a black sedan pulled into my driveway. Rico Martinez looked exactly like the kind of man my sister would hire for murder. Professional, unremarkable, and completely comfortable with violence. Time to find out if I was brave enough to get into a car with my own assassin. Rico stepped out of the sedan with a practiced smile, the kind customer service expression that probably made him seem trustworthy to unsuspecting clients. Average height, forgettable features, wearing a driver's uniform that looked legitimate enough to pass casual inspection. Ms. Anderson? I'm Rico. Your sister said you need transport to Vancouver? Thank you so much for accommodating the last-minute request, I said, shouldering my purse and picking up the briefcase containing fake jewelry samples. I really appreciate having an experienced driver for these mountain roads. His eyes lingered on my briefcase just a moment too long. Happy to help, family. As he opened the passenger door for me, I caught Detective Mitchell's voice through my earpiece. Target acquired. Surveillance teams are in position along your route. The first hour of driving passed normally. Rico made appropriate small talk about traffic, weather, and the upcoming mountain pass. He seemed genuinely professional, even charming. If I hadn't known he was planning to kill me, I might have found him likable. But I noticed small details that revealed his true nature. The way his eyes constantly scanned mirrors and side roads, checking for pursuit or witnesses. How he'd positioned a small toolkit within easy reach between our seats. The methodical way he tested the steering and brakes during the early part of our drive, familiarizing himself with the vehicle's responses. Your sister mentioned you're expanding the business internationally, he said as we entered the mountain pass. Must be exciting. It's been a lot of work. But yes, I've put my whole life into building what my mother started. Family businesses are special. All that history and tradition passing down. The irony of discussing family legacy with the man hired to end mine wasn't lost on me. As we climbed higher into the mountains, Rico began glancing more frequently at specific landmarks. I recognized the area from Detective Mitchell's briefing. Several isolated stretches where an accident would look believable, and help would be slow to arrive. Beautiful scenery up here, Rico commented, pulling into an overlook area. Mind if we stop for a minute? I want to check the brakes before we head into the steeper sections. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my voice casual. Of course. Safety first. Rico stepped out and walked toward the front of the car, toolkit in hand. Through my earpiece, I heard Detective Mitchell's urgent voice. He's accessing the brake system. Team 2, move in now. But before the surveillance team could reach us, Rico straightened up and returned to the driver's seat with a satisfied expression. Everything looks good, he said. Ready to continue? For the next 20 minutes, Rico drove normally while I sat in growing tension, waiting for the brake failure that would signal the true beginning of his assassination attempt. The police surveillance teams followed at a discreet distance, ready to intervene the moment anything went wrong. Then, as we approached a particularly dangerous series of curves, Rico suddenly accelerated. Hold on, he said. His voice completely changed from professional to predatory. This might get interesting. He stomped on the brake pedal. Nothing happened. The car continued gaining speed as we approached a hairpin turn with a 200-foot drop on one side. Rico's expression shifted from controlled menace to genuine panic as he realized the brakes were completely unresponsive. What the hell? He muttered, pumping the pedal frantically while yanking on the emergency brake. That didn't work either. Through my earpiece, Detective Mitchell's voice was urgent but controlled. Brake failure confirmed. Intervention vehicles are moving to intercept. But we were moving too fast for anyone to catch us before the turn. Rico grabbed the door handle, clearly planning to jump from the moving vehicle and leave me to die in the crash. But as he pulled the handle, nothing happened. The door wouldn't open. What did you do? He snarled at me. Nothing, I said truthfully, though I was starting to understand what had happened. But I think you should know. Detective Mitchell sends her regards. Rico's face went white as police vehicles appeared ahead of us, forming a barrier that would stop our car before it reached the dangerous curves. Behind us, more police units moved in to block any escape routes. As our car finally came to a controlled stop against the police barrier, I saw Rico fully understand that he'd walked into a trap. The brake lines had been sabotaged. All right, by police technicians who'd ensured his plan would fail at exactly the right moment and place for maximum evidence gathering. Rico Martinez, professional killer, had just confessed to attempted murder while being filmed by hidden cameras and recorded through multiple surveillance devices. And somewhere in the valley below, Madison was about to discover that hiring someone to murder your sister works better in theory than in practice. Rico Martinez, Detective Mitchell said, appearing at his window with handcuffs, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and federal racketeering charges. As Rico was led away, I realized my sister's plan had succeeded in one way she never intended. It had provided law enforcement with enough evidence to put both of them away for a very long time. Have you ever experienced betrayal so complete that it changed everything you thought you knew about your family? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because this story is just getting started. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Detective Mitchell's office when her phone rang with news that Madison had been arrested at the country house. Apparently, she'd been pacing the property for hours, checking her phone obsessively, waiting for confirmation that I was dead. Instead, she got confirmation that she was an idiot. She kept asking the arresting officers if there had been any accidents reported on the mountain pass. Detective Mitchell told me, shaking her head. When they told her no, she actually said, "But there should have been one by now." Sometimes I wonder if Madison inherited all the beauty genes and I got all the brain cells. Based on today's events, that theory seems increasingly likely. When they brought Madison to the station in handcuffs, she was still convinced Rico had somehow failed to complete a simple brake sabotage job. The look on her face when Detective Mitchell played back the recordings of her conversations with Rico was priceless, like watching someone realize they'd been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. "This is impossible," Madison kept saying as she listened to her own voice planning my murder. "Those messages are taken out of context. What context makes brake lines should fail on those curves sound innocent?" Detective Mitchell asked dryly. Madison's lawyer arrived within the hour. Some expensive defense attorney she'd apparently contacted weeks ago, which suggested she'd been planning for the possibility of getting caught. Smart planning, terrible execution. The evidence was overwhelming. Screenshots from her own computer, audio recordings, financial transfers to Rico, the forged documents she'd prepared for after my death, plus Rico's confession, which included detailed descriptions of their planning meetings. "Mrs. Weber," the lawyer said finally, "I strongly recommend we discuss a plea agreement." "A plea agreement?" Madison's voice cracked. "For what? I haven't done anything wrong." Even her expensive lawyer looked at her like she'd lost her mind. The interrogation room had one-way glass, and I watched Madison cycle through denial, anger, bargaining, and complete psychological breakdown in the span of 2 hours. She kept insisting that she never meant for anything bad to happen, which is a fascinating way to describe hiring a professional killer. When Detective Mitchell showed her the photos of Rico tampering with the brake system, Madison finally cracked. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "I needed the money. The mansion is bleeding me dry. The property taxes alone are $12,000 a month. I can't afford the maintenance, the staff, the utilities. I was going to lose everything Mom left me. So you decided to murder your sister?" Detective Mitchell's voice was perfectly flat. "I just wanted what was fair. Scarlett got the business that makes millions. I got beautiful buildings that cost a fortune to maintain. How is that fair?" "Ah, yes. Because clearly the solution to inheriting expensive assets is sister side. I'm sure that's exactly what Mom had in mind when she wrote her will." The most disturbing part was Madison's complete lack of remorse about involving Emma. When Detective Mitchell asked about traumatizing her 8-year-old daughter, Madison actually said, "Emma needs to understand that family takes care of family." By family takes care of family, she apparently meant children should help their mothers plan murders. Parenting goals right there. As I watched my sister get fingerprinted and photographed for her booking mugshot, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Not enough to forgive attempted murder, obviously, but pity for someone so fundamentally broken that she thought killing me was easier than selling a mansion. Madison had always been spoiled, but I'd never realized she was also completely delusional about how money, inheritance, and basic human decency actually work. The arraignment was scheduled for the following morning. Madison would be held without bail, classified as a flight risk due to the premeditated nature of her crimes. Emma was safe in protective custody, probably getting the first peaceful night's sleep she'd had in months. And I was alive, which really seemed to irritate Madison more than anything else about this whole situation. Tomorrow, we'd find out whether the justice system takes attempted murder as seriously as I hoped they would. The trial moved faster than anyone expected, partly because Madison's evidence was so overwhelming, and partly because her defense strategy seemed to be act as unsympathetic as possible in front of the jury. Her lawyer tried to argue temporary insanity due to financial stress, which might have worked if Madison hadn't spent months methodically planning my death with the organizational skills of a project manager. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor said during opening statements, "this was not a crime of passion. This was a business plan with murder as the desired outcome." He wasn't wrong. Madison had spreadsheets. The prosecution played recordings of Madison discussing optimal timing, backup plans if Rico's brake sabotage failed, and contingency payments for extra services if I survived the first attempt. She'd approached my assassination with the same attention to detail that most people use for wedding planning. Rico testified as part of his plea agreement, describing their meetings in excruciating detail. Apparently, Madison had provided him with my schedule, my usual driving routes, my vehicle information, and detailed photographs of me. She'd even researched the best locations for accidental crashes and the likelihood of survival rates for different types of vehicular trauma. The defendant was extremely thorough, Rico told the court. She wanted multiple scenarios prepared. If the brake failure didn't work, she'd discussed vehicle fires, highway accidents involving other drivers, and staged robberies gone wrong. Madison had literally been building a murder menu. I was almost impressed by the level of planning. If it weren't, focused on killing me. The defense's case fell apart when they called Madison to testify in her own defense. Against her lawyer's obvious advice, she insisted on taking the stand to set the record straight. "I never wanted to hurt Scarlett," she told the jury tearfully. "I just wanted what was rightfully mine." "And what exactly was rightfully yours?" the prosecutor asked during cross-examination. "The business. The real inheritance. My sister got everything valuable while I got beautiful buildings I can't afford to maintain. So you hired Mr. Martinez to kill your sister because you wanted her inheritance? That's not how I would put it. How would you put it?" Madison paused, clearly realizing she'd walked into a trap. "I would say that I was trying to correct an unfair situation." The prosecutor let that statement hang in the air for a moment. "By murdering your sister. By making sure the family assets were distributed more equitably." Even the judge looked incredulous. Madison had just confessed to premeditated murder while trying to explain why she wasn't guilty of premeditated murder. Her lawyer's face went through several interesting color changes during this testimony. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Madison was convicted on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, solicitation of murder, and financial fraud related to the forged documents. Rico received 12 years in federal prison, with additional charges for racketeering and operating a criminal enterprise. Apparently, I wasn't his first client. Madison received 18 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 10 years due to the premeditated nature of her crimes and the involvement of a minor child in her planning. When the judge read her sentence, Madison actually looked surprised, like she genuinely expected some kind of suspended sentence or community service. "Your Honor," she said, standing up despite her lawyer pulling on her arm, "I think there's been a mistake. I'm the victim here. My sister got the valuable inheritance." "Mrs. Weber," the judge replied coldly, "your sister got the inheritance she earned through years of work. You got exactly what you deserved through your choices." This sentence reflects the seriousness of attempting to murder a family member for financial gain. Madison's appeals were filed within a month and denied just as quickly. Apparently, recorded confessions and testimonies from hired killers don't leave much room for legal maneuvering. As I left the courthouse that final day, I realized Madison had been right about one thing. The inheritance distribution hadn't been fair. She'd deserved much less than she got. 3 months after Madison's conviction, I received a call that broke my heart in the best possible way. "Ms. Anderson," said Mrs. Thompson from Child Protective Services, "Emma has been asking about you constantly. She'd like to see you if you're available." I was at the facility within an hour. Emma was sitting in a small playroom, drawing with colored pencils. When she saw me, she looked up with eyes that seemed lighter somehow, less burdened than I'd seen them in years. "Auntie Scarlett," she said quietly, then ran to hug me. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you doing?" "Better," she said simply. "The nice doctors here help me talk about scary things." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the child psychologist assigned to Emma's case, joined us for our visit. She explained that Emma had been making remarkable progress in therapy, finally able to process the trauma she'd been carrying. "Emma has been very brave about sharing her experiences," Dr. Mitchell told me. "She's told us about feeling responsible for keeping family secrets, and about being afraid to speak because she didn't want to make anyone angry." "I thought if I talked about the scary computer messages, Mommy would get in trouble," Emma whispered. "But then I thought if I didn't talk, you would die." I didn't know what to do. My heart shattered for this little girl who'd been forced to choose between protecting her mother and protecting me. "You did exactly the right thing, Emma. You saved my life by being brave enough to tell me the truth. Dr. Mitchell says Mommy made bad choices, but that doesn't mean I'm bad." "You are definitely not bad, sweetheart. You're wonderful." After several visits and extensive background checks, the court process began for transferring custody to me permanently. Madison's parental rights were terminated due to her conviction and the psychological harm she'd caused Emma through her criminal behavior. The most difficult part came when the social worker asked Emma if she wanted to visit Madison in prison. "No," Emma said immediately, then looked worried. Is that mean? Not at all, sweetheart, I assured her. You don't have to see anyone who makes you feel scared or uncomfortable. Dr. Mitchell explained that Emma's refusal to see Madison was actually a healthy boundary-setting behavior, showing that she was learning to prioritize her own emotional safety. Many children in Emma's situation feel guilty about not wanting to see an incarcerated parent, she told me privately. Emma's ability to clearly state her preference shows significant emotional growth. The final custody hearing was remarkably straightforward. Madison's lawyer didn't even contest my petition. Apparently, she'd instructed him not to fight it. My client believes this arrangement is in the child's best interest, he told the judge. It was possibly the first unselfish decision Madison had made in years, and she made it from a prison cell. When Judge Rodriguez officially granted me full custody of Emma, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Mom died. The deep satisfaction of family responsibility that comes from choice, not obligation. Congratulations, Emma whispered as we left the courthouse together. You're stuck with me now. I laughed, remembering that she was definitely developing her own sense of humor. I'm pretty sure I'm the lucky one in this arrangement. That evening, as Emma helped me make dinner in my kitchen, our kitchen now, she suddenly stopped stirring the pasta sauce and looked at me seriously. Auntie Scarlett? Yes? Do you think Mommy will miss me? The question was so innocent and complicated that I had to sit down at the kitchen table to answer it properly. I think your mommy loves you very much, even though she made terrible choices. But Emma, sometimes loving someone means letting them be safe and happy with someone else. Emma nodded thoughtfully. Like how you loved me enough to save me from the scary secrets? Exactly like that. As we finished making dinner together, I realized that Madison's plan had succeeded in one way she'd never intended. It had given me the family I'd never known I wanted. The difference was, this time it was built on truth instead of secrets, love instead of manipulation, and choice instead of obligation. Emma's transformation over the following months was nothing short of miraculous. With consistent therapy, a stable home environment, and the freedom to speak without fear, she began to blossom into the confident, talkative child she'd always been inside. Dr. Mitchell explained that Emma's 5 years of selective mutism had been a trauma response to the emotional chaos in Madison's household. Children often go silent when they're processing overwhelming situations, she told me during one of our monthly check-ins. Emma was protecting herself by not speaking, but she was also punishing herself for knowing things she felt she shouldn't know. The breakthrough came during a therapy session when Emma finally described the first time she'd overheard Madison talking about getting rid of me. I was supposed to be asleep, Emma told Dr. Mitchell, while I listened from the observation room. But Mommy was talking really loud on the phone about how Auntie Scarlett had too much and needed to share. Then she said maybe there were ways to make sure the sharing happened faster. Emma had been 6 years old when she first heard her mother discussing plans to hurt me. For 2 years she'd carried that knowledge, not fully understanding what it meant, but sensing that it was dangerous and wrong. I thought if I didn't talk about it, maybe it wouldn't happen, Emma explained. But then it got scarier and scarier, and I thought if I didn't talk at all, maybe nothing bad would happen to anyone. The child had literally given up her voice to try to prevent her mother from committing murder. The weight of that sacrifice made me cry for hours after that session. But now, living in an environment where the truth was safe, Emma was finding her voice again and discovering that she had quite a lot to say. Auntie Scarlett, she announced one morning over breakfast, I've decided I want to learn piano. That sounds wonderful. Any particular reason? Well, I was quiet for so long that now I want to make as much noise as possible. Piano seems like a good start. I enrolled her in lessons immediately. Emma also started asking questions about the business, showing genuine curiosity about the jewelry designs and the stories behind different gemstones. She had an eye for color and detail that reminded me strongly of Mom. Could I maybe help sometimes? She asked one afternoon while I worked on design sketches at home. I promise I won't break anything expensive. I think that could be arranged. Watching Emma discover her own personality and interests was like watching a flower bloom in fast forward. She was funny, insightful, surprisingly wise for her age, and completely fearless about expressing opinions. I think that necklace would look better with blue stones instead of green ones, she told me matter-of-factly while reviewing a client presentation. Green makes people think of sick feelings, but blue makes them think of calm feelings. She wasn't wrong. I adjusted the design and the client loved it. Emma's speech therapy sessions focused on building confidence in social situations, since she'd spent so many years avoiding interaction with other children. She's remarkably articulate for someone who went so long without speaking, her speech therapist told me. It's like she was composing full conversations in her head and just waiting for a safe space to share them. At school, Emma quickly made friends and became known for being one of the most talkative kids in her class. Her teacher mentioned that she seemed to have an endless supply of stories to tell, as if she was making up for years of silence. But the most significant change came one evening in October, 6 months after she'd moved in with me permanently. We were reading together before bedtime when Emma suddenly stopped in the middle of a page and looked at me with a serious expression. "Can I ask you something important?" "Of course. Would it be okay if... Would you mind if I called you Mom instead of Auntie Scarlett?" My breath caught. "Emma, that would make me incredibly happy. But are you sure?" "I'm sure. Moms are people who take care of you and love you and keep you safe. You do all those things. Madison gave birth to me, but you're my mom." I hugged her tightly, feeling a completeness I hadn't known was missing from my life. "I love you too, sweetheart. I'm honored to be your mom." That night, I lay awake thinking about how Madison's cruelty had inadvertently led to the most beautiful relationship I'd ever experienced. Emma calling me mom wasn't about replacing Madison. It was about claiming the love and security she deserved. Sometimes the best families are the ones we build from the pieces of broken ones. By spring, Emma and I had settled into a rhythm that felt natural and right. She'd been calling me mom for months, and hearing it never got old. If anything, it reminded me daily that the best things in life often come from the worst circumstances. The jewelry business was thriving beyond anything I'd imagined when Mom first left it to me. Our international expansion had opened markets in 12 countries, and we'd recently been featured in Vogue's Emerging Luxury Brands article. Success felt different now that I had someone to share it with. "Mom," Emma said one Saturday morning while we reviewed design sketches together, "what are we going to do with Madison's house? It's just sitting there empty." She was right. The mansion had been vacant since Madison's arrest, costing money in maintenance and taxes while serving no purpose, except as a reminder of family dysfunction. "What do you think we should do with it?" Emma considered this seriously. "We could sell it and put the money away for my college fund. That way something good comes from something bad." 8 years old and already wiser than most adults I knew. "That's exactly what we'll do." Selling Madison's mansion felt symbolic in ways I hadn't expected. The real estate agent estimated its value at just over $1 million after accounting for deferred maintenance costs. I set up a trust fund for Emma's education with the proceeds, ensuring she'd never face the financial limitations I'd dealt with in college. But more importantly, selling the mansion meant we could finally move into the house Emma had inherited from Mom, the country house where Madison's plumbing emergency had started this whole nightmare. The house was perfect for us. Large enough for Emma to have space to grow, small enough to feel cozy and manageable, and surrounded by gardens where she could run and play without the oppressive weight of family expectations hanging over everything. "I want to plant a vegetable garden," Emma announced on our first weekend in the new house, "and maybe some flowers that attract butterflies." "Sounds like a wonderful plan." As we explored the property together, Emma found an old jewelry box hidden in a closet in what had been Mom's study. "Look, Mom, there's something inside." The box contained a letter in Mom's handwriting, addressed to my future granddaughter. Emma's eyes widened as I read it aloud. "Whoever you are, wherever you come from, I hope you'll love this house as much as I did. Fill it with laughter, surround it with gardens, and remember that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice and love and the courage to protect what matters most." Emma hugged the letter to her chest. "It's like Grandma knew we'd end up here together." Maybe she did. Mom had always been perceptive about people's true natures. That evening, as Emma played piano in the living room, she'd progressed remarkably quickly and was working on a simplified version of Moonlight Sonata. I sat in Mom's study reviewing business reports. The jewelry company was generating more revenue than ever before. Our custom pieces were booking out 18 months in advance, and we'd recently signed exclusive contracts with 3 major luxury retailers. Success felt different than I'd expected. Instead of vindication or pride, I felt gratitude. Gratitude for work I loved, for a daughter who filled my life with joy, and for surviving Madison's attempt to destroy everything I'd built. "Mom?" Emma called from the living room. "Come listen to this." I found her playing a melody I didn't recognize, something she'd composed herself. It was beautiful, complex enough to be interesting, simple enough to be elegant, with an underlying happiness that seemed to capture everything good about our new life. "That's incredible, sweetheart. What inspired it?" "I was thinking about how we're safe now," she said simply, "and how nice it feels to make music instead of keeping secrets." As I listened to Emma play, I realized that Madison's plan had failed in every possible way. She'd wanted to steal my inheritance and destroy my life. Instead, she'd lost her freedom, her daughter, her home, and any claim to the family legacy she'd thought she deserved. Meanwhile, I'd gained a daughter, built a thriving business, and created the kind of family I'd always wanted but never thought I could have. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well. 2 years later, I stood in the kitchen of our country house, watching Emma chase butterflies in the garden she'd planted and maintained herself. At 10 years old, she was confident, happy, and completely unrecognizable from the traumatized, silent child who'd once whispered terrible secrets in my hallway. The jewelry business had grown beyond even my most optimistic projections. We now had retail partners in 23 countries, and I'd recently been invited to speak at the International Luxury Goods Summit about building authentic brand heritage. The company Mom started with a single storefront was now generating 8-figure annual revenue. But watching Emma laugh as a monarch butterfly landed on her outstretched finger reminded me that the real success wasn't measured in dollars or international recognition. The real success was the sound of a child's laughter filling a house that had once symbolized isolation and obligation, now transformed into a home built on choice and love. "Mom!" Emma called out, running toward the kitchen door. "The butterflies love the lavender we planted. Can we add more next spring?" "Absolutely. This is your garden. You can plant whatever makes you happy." Emma grinned and returned to her butterfly watching, completely secure in the knowledge that her opinions mattered and her wishes would be respected. 6 months ago, Emma had received her first and only letter from Madison in prison. She'd read it carefully, then handed it to me without comment. "I miss you every day," Madison had written. "I hope someday you'll understand that everything I did was because I love you and wanted to provide for your future." Even from prison, Madison was rewriting history, casting herself as a devoted mother, rather than someone who'd traumatized her daughter while plotting murder. Emma had dictated a brief response. "I hope you're getting help to understand why your choices hurt people. I'm safe and happy now. Maybe someday we can talk when you've learned to tell the truth." Wise beyond her years, and completely uninterested in accepting Madison's narrative of martyrdom. Madison's appeals had all been exhausted. She was serving 18 years, with no possibility of parole for another 7 years. According to her prison records, she'd been placed in solitary confinement twice for attempting to manipulate other inmates into making threatening phone calls to my business. Some people never learn. Rico Martinez had died in federal prison just over a year into his sentence, apparently the victim of other inmates who didn't appreciate professional killers. I felt no satisfaction in his death, but no sorrow either. He'd made his choices. Emma and I visited Mom's grave every few months, bringing fresh flowers and updates about the business and our life together. Emma liked to tell Mom's headstone about her piano progress, her garden, and the books she was reading. "I think Grandma would be proud of us," Emma said during our most recent visit, carefully arranging yellow roses around the headstone. "I'm certain she would be." That evening, as Emma practiced piano in the living room, my phone rang with news that would have devastated me 3 years ago, but now barely registered. "Ms. Anderson?" The voice belonged to a social worker from the Women's Correctional Facility. "I'm calling to inform you that your sister, Madison Weber, has been hospitalized following what appears to be a suicide attempt." I was quiet for a moment, processing information that felt simultaneously shocking and inevitable. "Is she going to be okay?" "She's stable. The attempt wasn't serious. More of a cry for attention, according to the medical staff. She's been asking to see her daughter." "That's not possible," I said firmly. "Emma has no interest in visiting, and I won't pressure her to change her mind for Madison's emotional manipulation." "I understand. I wanted to keep you informed as Emma's legal guardian." After hanging up, I sat in Mom's study, thinking about the different ways people respond to consequences. Emma had responded to trauma by finding her voice and building strength. Madison had responded to accountability by attempting manipulation from prison. I didn't mention Madison's hospitalization to Emma. She deserved to live without the weight of her birth mother's ongoing psychological drama. Later that night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she looked at me with the serious expression she wore when processing something important. "Mom, do you ever think about how different things would be if Madison hadn't tried to hurt you?" "Sometimes." "What made you think about that?" "I was thinking that if she hadn't done those scary things, I might still be living with her and keeping secrets and not talking. So maybe something good came from something bad." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe I needed to be rescued, even if it happened in a scary way. Maybe now I'm who I was supposed to be all along." I hugged her tightly, marveling at this child's ability to find meaning and gratitude in circumstances that would destroy most adults. "You're exactly who you were supposed to be, sweetheart, and I'm grateful every day that we found each other." As Emma drifted off to sleep, I walked through our house, truly ours now, filled with music and laughter, and the kind of peace that comes from building something authentic, rather than inheriting something hollow. Madison had wanted to kill me for an inheritance she thought I didn't deserve. Instead, she'd lost everything while giving me the family I'd never known I wanted. She remained in prison. No inheritance, no daughter, no future, no legacy except the destruction she'd caused. and I'd become exactly what she'd accused me of being, the daughter who'd inherited everything, built something beautiful from it, and refused to share it with people who'd rather destroy than create. The difference was, now I knew I'd earned it all. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family, betrayal, and finding strength you never knew you had. Drop a comment below about your own experiences with family drama. Sometimes sharing our stories helps us heal from them.